Baby steps.
After your faith hasn't let you down.
This is Infants on Thrones.
I'm looking for the further light and knowledge Father promised to send me.
Baby steps. Baby steps.
Look for the good in everyone.
Welcome back to Infants on Thrones. I'm Glenn Osland, a licensed therapist and certified life coach. And over the 13-year history of this podcast, we've shared a lot of listener essays, stories, reflections, and deeply personal explorations from you, the audience. And I've decided it's time to bring some of those voices back to life, to dust them off and, well, resurrect them. We'll call it the morning of the first resurrection. After all, resurrection is really about healing, restoring the body, mind, and soul to their most pristine, integrated state. So I thought, what if we could use modern tools like ChatGPT and Notebook LM to create a kind of AI puppet show, a thoughtful, playful deep dive into the mental health layers underneath these listener essays. Now, I'm creating this series for two audiences, primarily. First, for students studying for the National Counselor exam to help you explore these stories as real-world case studies. And second, for anyone who's ever wrestled with similar experiences to help you see the psychological and emotional insights that might apply to your own life. So, it's my pleasure to share these resurrected essays with you, renewed, reimagined, and ready for reflection. All right? Are you ready? Hold on to your hats and glasses.
Because this here's the wildest ride in the wilderness.
The Valedictorian of Mormonism, i.e., the laziest one in the class. Valedictorian. I didn't purposely set out to achieve such a great honor. Well, I take that back. Had I consistently tried to be the best member of the church I could be? You bet your butt I did. That's what got me into so much trouble. In the fall of 2010, I was teaching the 15-year-old Sunday school class, and the subject of persecution came up. Now let me preface this anecdote with the point that I was a darn good Sunday school teacher. I researched my lessons intensely and brought true doctrine to the table each week. My students liked me, trusted me, and brought me cookies at Christmas. When I asked my kids if any of them had ever experienced persecution, a young lady raised her hand. Yeah, one time a guy told me I was stupid because Joseph Smith had like a ton of wives and our church is really weird. Can you believe that? Joseph Smith never had a bunch of wives. Well, I don't think he did, but you better let me check on that so we can know the truth for sure. We know Brigham Young had multiple wives, but I'm unsure about Joseph. I'll get back to you guys next week. That fateful exchange changed the course of my life forever. I kicked it into overdrive, fact-checking my students' denial of Joseph Smith's polygamy. I am a bit of an achiever. I despise the word overachiever. For one thing, it's overused. For another thing, it's pejorative. For a third thing, it makes little sense. Achieving things is great, especially when it is one of the pillars of your identity. Back to Brother Joseph. Turns out he did marry people besides Emma. Oh, I did my Mormon due diligence and spent lots of time, but only on Fair Mormon, LDS.org, and DeseretBooks.com. This led to some interesting conversations with my husband and an uncomfortable follow-up the next Sunday. So, just to clear up that question about Joseph Smith from last week, yes, it turns out he did marry multiple women, more than a few, so feel free to ask your parents if you have any other questions. I was thorough, honest, and succinct with my trusting students, but I felt that the matter was just not finished for myself. There were footnotes to follow up and source materials to double-check. This was kind of a big deal for me. I was a stalwart A++ Mormon woman, Personal Progress Award winner, speaker at seminary graduation, temple married, producer of multiple progeny, Relief Society presidency, primary presidency, Scripture Chase champion for heaven's sake. Remember, achiever? I strove for nothing less than excellence in my academic career, my research career, and my spiritual career, of course. I was out to get to the bottom of this strange finding. Joseph Smith marrying lots of ladies? Sounded absurd. I plunged down the rabbit hole with a fierce determination that there is nothing that can't be solved with hard work and the attainment of further light and knowledge. I read books. I listened to podcasts. I researched. I journaled. I prayed. I counseled with my husband, studied the scriptures. I attended every extra stake conference meeting, Relief Society meeting, training meeting available. I listened to every second of General Conference. Now, let's be honest, I was magnifying the heck out of my church commitments and diving into my prayer and scripture study with ponderizing as my battle cry. I was determined to be the best bleeping Mormon woman that ever existed, because that would fix it. That would fix my religious world that was crumbling around me. In 2014, when our stake held a special adult session where members could anonymously submit their questions for the stake presidency to answer, I was on it. I carefully composed a dozen questions covering everything from members attending pride parades to the second anointing to the financing of the City Creek Mall. I still remember the exact moment when the first counselor in the stake presidency said, "All right, let's get to your questions." And then he proceeded to read my first question, word for word, from the pulpit. I sat up straighter and stared at the man. Was he really going to address polyandry in front of all these faithful members? Then he read my second question out loud, word for word. What was happening? Was this whole stake conference session just for my questions? I looked around the very sizable congregation. Did anyone else know that I was the origin of all of this? I elbowed my husband after the third straight question was read, with a delighted smile on my face. Thrilled with this new achievement. My husband told me to knock it off or we would be outed. After all, we were sitting right next to my parents. Here it was. My hard work and persistence was about to pay off. I pulled out my little notebook and my pen. It hovered expectantly over the page. This was it. Except it wasn't, and it didn't. The answer to every question was, because that's the way Heavenly Father said to do it. Or, we'll find out in the next life. Huh? That was the extent of this special meeting. These guys clearly didn't know the meaning of putting effort into their answers. So, we left the meeting with disappointment and, spoiler alert, several future meetings with our bishop and stake president. So much for anonymous submissions. That's okay. I resolved to try harder on my own to clarify these issues. The funny thing is, the harder I tried, the more I failed. I started to notice my leaders saying that people who find fault with the church are just apathetic. Quote, "People only leave the church for no good reason." Unquote. My father-in-law. Quote, "What kind of patty cake taffy-pulled experience is that?" Unquote. Jeffrey R. Holland. Quote, "Let us not weary in well-doing." Unquote. Spencer W. Kimball. Quote, "It's the easy way out to just leave." Unquote. Ward member. Quote, "Are you praying? Are you reading your scriptures?" Unquote. My bishop. Am I praying? I felt like the world had turned upside down and inside out. I was working harder in the areas of religious knowledge and spiritual foundation than I ever had. Ever. This is how it works, right? This is how you fix it. And all that historical and theological rigor seemed to get me was looks of consternation from my bishop and stake president. Guys, I'm doing the work. I'm putting in the hours. Them. How does your husband feel about this? Maybe you should take a break. The more effort I gave to explaining, citing sources, clarifying origins of doctrine and church culture, the more they perceived me as a no-good, lazy Mormon who just didn't want to do what I was asked. Pray, pay, obey. It came to a head when my husband and I met with our stake president. Looking at my husband, he said, "So do you have any specific concerns I can help with?" Me pouncing on the opening. "Why, yes. Chapter 20 in the new seminary manual is on polygamy, and I'm quite concerned about how they portray Joseph Smith's relationship with Helen Mar Kimball as sanctioned by God. I would rather not have my 13-year-old son thinking that God wanted a 30-something man to take a 14-year-old as a wife. I strongly disagree with the way the information is being presented. My stake president. I'm not really aware of this new material. I think I understand your concern. It sounds reasonable. I'll look into it. I'll look into it. The death knell of any subject at one of these meetings. He never got back to me. The highest priesthood authority I could gain access to had no idea what was being taught to the youth under his stewardship. I had scoured the newest seminary manuals for unsavory subject matter that I felt would be detrimental to my children, whom I have stewardship over, and he brushed me off with 4 little words. How could this be? I was making great gains. I was bringing real evidence and concerns to the table, and their lack of effort was trumping me every time. The most painful aspect of detaching from this now abusive relationship was the idea that they considered me lazy. That word, oh, that word. I had strived my whole life to avoid being labeled with that one word. Now here I was, in the eyes of my family, friends, and ecclesiastical authority figures, a no-good Mormon that just doesn't want to do what is required. I was certain I had leveled up at least 12 times when it came to church history, doctrine, policies, LDS culture, gender roles, temples, church politics. Years of running primary programs, orchestrating Relief Society activities, visiting teaching, Cub Scout pack meetings, talks given, casseroles delivered, lessons taught, testimonies bared. Don't you dare use that word on me. Me. Look how hard I'm working on my spiritual understanding. Them. Your disobedience indicates laziness. You probably want to sin. My years of study, effort, preparation, and tears were all for naught when it came to earning those spiritual gold stars. You can only attain summa cum laude in the LDS institution by eschewing rigorous religious intellectual pursuits. Damn it! Guess I was not as smart as I thought I was. Turns out, if you try too hard, you're lazy. And if you don't ask any questions, you win.
That was a great old listener essay from Infants on Thrones, newly resurrected on the first morning of an unusually introspective Tuesday.
It really was. And that essay, for all its specific details about doctrine and history, it gives us something incredibly valuable.
What's that?
It's an almost perfect case study, a living laboratory, really, for understanding something that goes much deeper than theology.
Right. It's about the neuroscience of a religious transition.
Exactly.
And that's our mission today, isn't it? We're going to take this story of extreme dedication, then disappointment, and finally disillusionment, and we're going to just shift the framework on it.
Completely.
This isn't just a tale about someone finding contradictions in a book.
No, not at all.
It's fundamentally a story about a nervous system that spent decades running on a very, very specific program, and then it just reached its point of inevitable biological failure.
We're looking for the software beneath the scripture.
The biological patterns underneath the dogma. That's it.
And what's so fascinating about her experience is that she started this intellectual search, trying to solve a puzzle. But the crisis she actually faced, the one that consumed her, it wasn't intellectual at all.
It happened in her body.
It happened in her physiology. It was a crisis of the body. So to understand why this process is just so destabilizing, why it feels like the world is literally collapsing, we're going to look at her journey through 3 different but deeply interconnected lenses.
Think of them like stacked layers.
Yay.
Right, like geological layers of the human psyche, and each one is shaping the one above it. This is basically our map for this deep dive.
It is. So the foundational layer, that cultural and psychological imprint we call samskara.
Okay, samskara.
Yeah, it's a concept from Eastern philosophy. It just describes the deep grooves of our conditioning, the emotional, the cognitive, the relational patterns that are carved into us by repetition and culture, right from childhood.
Okay, so that's layer 1. What's built on top of that?
Layer 2 is what we're calling controlled hallucination. This is a neurological idea popularized by neuroscientists like Anil Seth.
Right.
And it suggests that our perception of reality isn't this direct one-to-one thing. It's actually the brain constructing its best guess about the world based almost entirely on those past patterns, on those samskaras.
So the grooves from layer 1 are basically writing the script for layer 2.
Perfectly put. And then finally, layer 3. This is the physical response. We're talking about the polyvagal theory.
Dr. Stephen Porges' work.
Exactly. And this explains how our body's autonomic nervous system is constantly scanning our environment for cues of safety or threat or just total overwhelm. And this happens way below our conscious awareness.
It controls everything, our ability to reason, to connect with people, even to think complex thoughts.
It controls the whole show.
So if we pull all 3 of those layers together, we get to the core insight of this entire story. And this is why it resonates with so many people who go through this kind of thing.
What's the insight?
The sheer diligence, the relentless effort, the perfectionism that made her this successful, highly valued believer.
All the things she was rewarded for.
Exactly. That exact personality trait, which is really a survival strategy, it actually accelerated her disillusionment when the system failed to reward that effort.
So her best coping mechanism
Became the very instrument of her crisis.
That's the ultimate paradox. The meticulous, effort-driven tools she developed her whole life to achieve certainty and to earn belonging. Those were the exact tools that guaranteed she would eventually run headlong into this massive, unsolvable, systemic problem.
She was too good at following the rules of the system to ignore it when the rules stopped making sense.
She was too effective to stay.
Let's unpack that opening frame then.
Yeah.
She describes this very public, very high-stakes clash with her church leaders over these tough historical questions. But then she reframes the whole thing.
Yeah, that line is so powerful.
She says she stood not before the judgment bar of God, but before the far more honest tribunal of her own nervous system.
That phrase is a mic drop for what we're talking about. It's the whole shift in a nutshell. We tend to think of a faith transition as this conscious, intellectual thing. You know, you gather facts, you weigh the evidence, you decide to leave.
Think it's a court case in your head.
Exactly. But what she reveals is that long before the intellectual beliefs started to fade, the internal programming, that survival strategy built since she was a kid, it was already active. And it was the failure of that program to keep her feeling safe inside that finally forced the whole issue.
And this is where we have to get really clear on the difference between a belief and a pattern. You brought this up earlier, and it's just so critical.
It's everything.
Intellectually, you can change a belief. Maybe it takes a week, maybe a month. You can decide, okay, certain historical claims are wrong, or a leader isn't infallible. That's just the top layer updating.
But the pattern, that's different.
The pattern is embodied. It's the deep behavioral and emotional blueprint carved by decades of repetition. That pattern is what tells your body how to seek safety, how to define your self-worth, how to react to authority.
And what actions promise you'll get relief from anxiety. Right. So when the conscious mind is thinking, this doctrine doesn't make logical sense, the body, the pattern layer, is registering something much, much more alarming.
What's it registering?
It's registering my entire blueprint for safety, for belonging, for my very survival is now compromised. And that isn't just confusing. It triggers this deep existential alarm.
Which is why the crisis feels so physical. It's somatic. It's felt in the body.
Yeah, as anxiety, stomach problems, you can't sleep, or you just have this constant low-grade dread that you can't shake.
So the body's just running on autopilot on all this old conditioning, and then it hits a piece of information, or maybe more often, a specific interaction.
Like the one she had with her leaders, that theological shrug.
Exactly. And that creates this deep systemic friction between the expected pattern, if I ask a sincere question, I'll get a sincere answer, and the actual reality she experienced.
And that friction, that physiological alarm bell going off, that's the real crisis point.
Not the historical fact she dug up.
The fact was just the spark, the tension, the emotional exhaustion. That was the stored energy of the pattern hitting an immovable object. And to understand that specific demanding pattern, we have to start at the very foundation.
We have to start with the psychological groove. We have to start with samskara.
That's where it all begins.
Okay, let's dig into that foundational layer. How does this idea of samskara help us map the conditioning that she experienced in such a highly structured world?
Well, samskara is a Sanskrit term, and it's just beautifully illustrative. You can translate it simply as a persistent habit or a mental and emotional imprint, a conditioning.
So it's not so much a philosophy as it is.
It's more like deep grooves etched into your neural pathways in your psyche. The vinyl record analogy is perfect here. When life presents a familiar stimulus, a challenge, confusion, a demand for faith, the internal needle just drops and the same song plays automatically.
And I have to imagine that a high-demand, very structured environment, especially one that's so focused on works and service and moral achievement, there's got to be incredibly efficient at carving those grooves.
Incredibly efficient. And it's not necessarily about coercion, it's just the result of systematic repetition and very consistent reward.
Right.
Every calling you have, every testimony you share, every talk, every ritual, it's all carving the marble in the exact same direction. It just deepens the pattern that promises you'll have coherence and worth.
Let's look at how she describes herself, because she gives us this stunningly clear map of the groove that resulted from all that. She doesn't just call herself a regular member.
No, she calls herself a spiritually overachieving wonderkind.
And she backs it up with what you called her A-plus resume. She lists it all out. Stalwart, A++ Mormon woman, Personal Progress Award winner, speaker at seminary graduation, Scripture Chase champion for heaven's sake. It just goes on.
It's exhaustive.
But this list, it isn't bragging.
No, not at all. It's a detailed map of her survival mechanism.
So if you had to boil down her core life software, her operating system, into one single sentence based on that resume, what would her central samskara be?
It would be this. Achievement equals safety and belonging. Her body and her mind learned very early on that the path to wordiness and safety involves maximum effort. It involves perfectionism. And it involves never, ever letting the quality or the quantity of your output drop.
So she didn't just believe in the system.
She mastered the system of performance within the system.
Which leads us to the core trap, right?
Yeah.
She internalized this ultimate promise that the system makes, maybe implicitly, to the most diligent people.
And what's that promise?
If I work hard enough to truly deserve certainty, then everything will eventually make sense.
And that promise is the fatal flaw, because effort can work in the material world. You study for a test, you pass, you practice a skill, you get better.
But effort cannot guarantee certainty when you're facing philosophical or historical incoherence.
Exactly. The achievement-based samskara prepared her perfectly for life, but terribly for doubt.
And we see that groove just take over instantly when she hits that first piece of friction. When the teenager mentions polygamy, what's her first reaction?
It's not intellectual doubt. It's not moral shock.
It's pure programmed duty.
Right. Her mind automatically just snaps into that familiar problem-solving mode. I need to confirm the facts, clarify the truth, and then I can rest. The pattern just takes over. Research, fix, clarify, excel.
The automatic song of certainty through effort just starts playing.
And that's the hallmark of a deeply conditioned samskara. The immediate reaction isn't to look inward and reflect. It's external action designed to restore coherence to the outside world.
Which is why her path after finding these initial problems was so painful, but also so predictable. Because she was conditioned to solve confusion with just maximum relentless effort.
So when the cracks appeared, she didn't step back. She didn't pause.
No, she plunged down the rabbit hole with this fierce determination. She doubled down on her obedience, convinced that if she just tried harder, that was the only key missing to resolve all of this.
Her conditioning left her completely defenseless against the possibility that the problem wasn't her lack of effort,
but the inherent incoherence within the system itself.
And that realization is terrifying for someone whose self-worth is completely tied to being a good problem solver.
So this all just accelerates until we get to the climax, the stake meeting test. And here she is operating at peak samskara, meticulously preparing 12 precise, complex questions.
About polyandry, financial transparency, modern moral issues.
She's basically submitting a thesis. She's treating it like the final exam that she knows she can ace. Her internal prediction is ironclad. Precision will yield clarity.
And this is the moment of the physiological thud. Her expectation diligence yields certainty. It just collides violently with the reality of the organizational shrug.
Right. The answers were vague, they were based on spiritual cliches, or they were just endlessly deferred.
We'll find out in the next life, or just trust the process. Her samskara hits a brick wall that her entire lifetime of preparation did not account for.
And when her high-intensity questioning keeps going because the samskara is demanding a resolution, her leaders start to interpret that persistence as a failure on her part.
They call it rebellion, disobedience, or the ultimate insult.
Laziness.
Let's just pause on that word, lazy. For someone whose entire life structure and self-worth is built on the foundation that diligence equals righteousness, lazy isn't just a critique of her behavior.
No, it's an annihilation of her core identity. It's a full-on denial of her entire survival strategy.
Her passionate reaction, don't you dare use that word on me, that's an instinctive, deep-seated repulsion to the ultimate invalidation.
It's her body screaming against the threat to its very definition of safety. The system is telling her that her highest effort, the very thing that made her worthy, is now a sign of a moral failing.
And that is psychologically devastating.
So when that foundational operating pattern, the samskara, is threatened on this level, the conscious intellectual mind just gets overwhelmed. The brain knows it can't process this level of incoherence.
And that's the signal for the deeper brain structures, the predictive systems, to take over, which leads us straight into the concept of controlled hallucination.
Okay, so the term controlled hallucination sounds, I don't know, it sounds incredibly dismissive, like a lifetime of faith was just an illusion. How can we use that term constructively, as a neutral scientific concept, without invalidating her deeply felt past reality?
That is such a critical question. We have to understand that this term isn't philosophical. It's descriptive of how our brains function. The neuroscientist Anil Seth argues that our consciousness, our lived felt reality, is the brain's best guess about the world, constructed moment by moment.
So the brain is essentially a prediction machine.
A prediction machine. It gathers input, it compares it to past experiences and conditioned patterns, samskara, and it generates a prediction of what should be happening.
So if I'm getting this right, we don't actually perceive reality directly. We perceive the brain's internal model of reality, and the sensory input we get gestates that prediction. It doesn't create the whole picture from scratch.
That's it, exactly. It's like you're watching a movie where most of the frames are filled in by the projector's memory, and only a little bit of new information requires a minor adjustment here and there.
And if you've been raised in a specific cultural or religious structure like she was, that framework becomes the default operating system, the predictive template.
Yes. For her, Mormonism wasn't just a belief system. It was the mechanism her brain used to interpret everything. Authority, morality, belonging, meaning, all of it.
So the brain sets up these automatic hallucination rules based on decades of reinforcement. What are those implicit predictions in this specific context?
Well, they're the foundational assumptions. Leaders are trustworthy. Obedience yields blessings. Effort produces a clear spiritual reward. And truth is always consistent. Her brain predicts a world where these rules always hold true, and it filters everything she sees to confirm that prediction.
And this is optimized through things like confirmation bias, right? You only notice the facts that support your model.
And motivated reasoning, where you desperately want the prediction to be right, so you kind of reason backward from the conclusion you want.
So the moment the teenager mentions polygamy, the brain registers what you'd call a prediction error. The template predicted coherence. The input suggested a contradiction.
And the brain's first move is not to replace the model. Its first move is to desperately try to restore the coherence within the existing framework.
This is that critical stage she entered. She wasn't seeking information to debunk her faith.
No, she was seeking information to preserve her reality. She goes straight to the official sources, Fair Mormon, LDS.org, trying to patch the holes in the brain's hallucination. She is, in essence, trying to fact-check the essay written by her own subconscious mind.
And her determination to be the best bleeping Mormon woman that ever existed. That's the predictive hallucination driving her behavior. The samskara is supplying the energy.
And the predictive mind is dictating the action. If I increase my effort, the world must become coherent again. If I just work hard enough, the input will match the sacred prediction.
But these predictive models have their limits, right? Especially when the foundational assumptions get contradicted.
They do. When reality, in the form of historical documents or these vague leadership responses, fundamentally clashes with the model, the brain experiences prediction error accumulating way too rapidly to patch. And this rapid error accumulation triggers a profound existential threat because the world is no longer predictable.
So when she publicly presents her 12 meticulous questions, expecting validation, and instead she gets dismissal, that's when the prediction error is maximized.
And when errors pile up that quickly, the brain experiences a kind of failure mode. It crashes. This shows up as acute disorientation, cognitive dissonance so severe it feels physical.
Profound distrust in authority, a collapse of meaning.
Exactly.
And she describes this crash perfectly. Her quote, "I felt like the world had turned upside down and inside out." That isn't just a metaphor, is it?
No, it's the literal internal feeling of her predictive framework, the coherent world her brain had so carefully hallucinated for decades, just failing to hold together. The ground beneath her feet literally vanished.
It's the somatic reality of prediction failure.
And then the final, ultimate blow, the accusation of laziness. That shatters the entire framework because her self-model was built on the prediction that effort equals righteousness. So when her highest effort is labeled as its opposite, the predictive system responsible for her safety is just annihilated.
And when that collapse happens, the conscious predictive mind has to give up control. It's completely overloaded.
And that's when the older, more primal layer of the nervous system, the polyvagal layer, takes emergency command. Which brings us to the body's essential theology.
Right, the polyvagal theory, developed by Dr. Stephen Porges. It gives us a map for understanding the physiology of our emotional responses.
That's it. It explains how our autonomic nervous system, the one that runs automatically, controlling digestion, heart rate, all that stuff, is constantly and unconsciously scanning our environment for cues of safety or danger. He calls this process neuroception.
And these physiological states, they aren't choices we make. They're survival strategies we inherited from our evolutionary ancestors.
But they absolutely dictate our capacity for everything, from deep reasoning to feeling connected to other people. We can simplify the vagus nerve's hierarchy of response into three main states, starting with the newest one evolutionarily.
Okay, so the first one is the ventral vagal state.
Right, and this is the ideal state, the state of connection, safety, and groundedness. When we're here, we're socially engaged, we feel clarity, warmth, we're present.
And then second is the sympathetic state.
The familiar fight or flight response. When a threat is detected, the body mobilizes, heart rate goes up, muscles tense, our focus narrows right onto the perceived threat, and our mind is just screaming, I have to act, I have to fix this, and now a W.
Okay, and then the third one, the dorsal vagal state.
This is the oldest, most primal response. It's reserved for overwhelming, inescapable threat. When fight or flight is impossible, the body just drops into a massive shutdown.
So you feel numb.
Numbness, dissociation, heavy exhaustion, disconnection. The body literally pulls the emergency brake to conserve energy. Sometimes it can even manifest as a literal functional collapse.
And if we map her journey onto these three states, we can see that the whole crisis was being dictated by her biology, completely separate from the intellectual content of her question.
Completely. It's a physiological story.
So let's do that. Let's map it. At the beginning, the essay describes her as this thriving, beloved Sunday school teacher. She's validated by her community. She's confident. That feeling of warmth and easy belonging.
That's pure ventral vagal energy. She was co-regulating successfully within that safe structure.
Then the shift happens with the polygamy question. Her nervous system immediately registers a potential inconsistency, which threatens her core identity.
And that leads to sympathetic activation. You can see the physiology of it. Her jaw tightens, her mind races. She feels this urgent need to research and fix the problem.
And her religious diligence becomes a channeled fight response. Her hyper-focus, her research frenzy, her overfunctioning. This isn't just zeal.
No, it's her body trying to metabolize sympathetic energy. The message is, I am in danger because the world is incoherent. I must fix it with overwhelming effort. She's trying to use sheer determination to outrun the uncertainty.
Her whole system, driven by that achievement samskara, believes that if she can just apply enough pressure, enough diligence, the threat will be resolved.
And she'll get back to that ventral vagal safety. This is the tragedy of a sympathetic response in an intellectual crisis. The body demands action, but the only appropriate action is often quiet acceptance.
And this anxiety just accelerates dramatically during the Q&A at the state conference. She's sitting there, she's electrically charged, her heart is racing, her breath is shallow, her mind is hyper alert.
Just hoping for the validation that will release all that sympathetic tension. She's preparing for the relief of resolution.
But when the answers don't come, when she's just met with cliches and deferrals, her system can't process the sheer scale of the prediction error.
And that unresolved, maximized sympathetic threat drops the body directly into dorsal collapse. The body just can't sustain that level of energetic output required for the fight, so it slams on the emergency brake.
She describes this shift so viscerally. Numbness, a heavy, sinking feeling, profound exhaustion, futility. And her final line to her leaders, "You win." That's so often misinterpreted as her giving up intellectually.
But physiologically, that phrase is pure dorsal vagal surrender. It is not an intellectual concession. It's a moment of total biological collapse. Her body is signaling, we have used all available energy in the fight response, and the threat remains unresolved and inescapable. We must shut down and preserve resources.
And this is the deep reframing we need. She is not giving up, and she is certainly not being lazy, the word her leaders used on her.
Her body is protecting her. It's dropping into this primitive shutdown state, conserving energy when there's no viable path for fight or flight left. Her vagus nerve is doing exactly what it evolved to do under conditions of overwhelming, inescapable threat.
It's survival, not failure.
It's survival.
Okay, so this is where we need to connect the dots for the listener's ongoing life.
Yeah.
Because the really complex part of this is that even when she physically leaves that structure, the samskara, that groove, that effort equals certainty. It doesn't just vanish.
No, it just hums underneath everything. It influences her behavior in the secular world.
The groove is a physical pathway in the brain, right?
Mm-hmm.
Reinforced over decades.
It doesn't care if the template is religious or corporate. It just knows the command. Maximize effort to maximize safety. And the deepest grief after a transition often isn't about losing a belief. It's about losing that internal promise that if you do everything right, you'll earn a predictable, certain reality.
So how does this actually show up? For people who shared her achievement groove, what common patterns do they manifest in a non-religious context?
We see several distinct patterns. They often become overfunctioners in new contexts, careers, fitness, relationships, even activism. They try to earn their worth through endless productivity, which leads very quickly to burnout.
And they might struggle to trust their own authority.
Profoundly, because they were taught implicitly that clarity and authority resided in an external, infallible source.
And critically, they struggle with any form of perceived inefficiency or laziness, either in themselves or in others.
That quote, "Don't you dare use that word on me," it becomes a kind of internal trigger. For someone conditioned by a system where righteousness and effort are fused, the accusation of lazy just hits the core structural integrity of their self-worth.
It's perceived as an attack on their moral character, not just their productivity.
Right. And the sting lingers for years because the nervous system remembers that original threat of annihilation.
It's the constant residual hallucination running in the background. Even outside the religion, the brain is still trying to predict based on the old software.
If I slow down, I'm failing. Or if my new community doesn't approve of my choices, my concerns aren't valid. The brain is constantly trying to fill in the missing predictive blanks using the only script it knows really well.
And that's the real challenge of healing then. Leaving means you have to undergo this total re-education of your body. You have to learn to interpret your body's signals, that tightness in your chest, that sudden rush of energy, without the old religious filter telling you those signals mean you're somehow morally flawed or failing.
You have to decouple physical sensation from moral judgment.
So many listeners find that this physical and emotional residue makes moving forward almost impossible without some help. You said people seek therapy not because they're broken, but because they're running on outdated survival strategies.
Right.
What does that adaptation look like in a clinical setting?
Therapy really serves as a systemic adaptation guide. It helps when those leftover prediction errors are still causing acute anxiety. For instance, if a simple request from a new boss triggers the full sympathetic fight response she used with her leaders, that's a sign the old patterns are still running.
Or if there's just constant exhaustion from overfunctioning, from burnout.
Exactly. Or if the shame or collapse when confronting disappointment or betrayal persists. Or if that sting of the word lazy is still active, still merging effort and worth.
And because the problem is somatic, as you said, effective therapy has to bridge that gap between mind and body. We're not just talking about traditional talk therapy here.
No, we're looking for methods that directly address the nervous system's stored trauma and confusion.
Can you give us some examples of those?
Certainly. Acceptance and commitment therapy, or ACT, is excellent for helping you recognize those conditioned grooves, the samskaras, without having to obey them. It teaches something called diffusion.
Diffusion.
Separating yourself from the thought. You realize, I am having the thought that I am lazy rather than just I am lazy. It creates a little bit of space.
And for the polyvagal piece, what helps the body recover from that constant cycling between fight or flight and shutdown?
That's where somatic experiencing, or SE, and other body-oriented therapies come in. They focus on tracking and regulating the nervous system directly. They teach the body how to gently move out of that dorsal collapse and how to metabolize sympathetic energy safely without needing to go into overdrive or collapse in shame.
So they help update the nervous system's prediction.
They teach it that the old authority structures are no longer immediate threat detectors.
As you pointed out, healing isn't only clinical. Sometimes what's needed is non-therapeutic community.
Absolutely. The radical, non-therapeutic healing is about finding your community, a friend or a group who listens without judgment, where your shared history is met with laughter and compassion. And it involves granting yourself radical permission to rest without earning it. That's a direct intervention against the achievement samskara.
So ultimately, the goal isn't to erase the conditioning. That's neurologically impossible.
Yeah.
What is the goal then in terms of control?
Awareness is liberation. The goal is to recognize the samskaras and understand the polyvagal responses, to identify them when they activate so that they no longer run the show. You shift from being driven by the pattern to simply noticing the pattern.
So the samskara that built her identity was all about relentless striving, maximum effort, and seeking certainty. Then the rewiring process has to begin with the exact opposite strategy.
Gentleness, curiosity, embracing uncertainty.
It's the total antithesis of the groove that shaped her.
It is, and that contrast is essential. We can't just out-effort the problem. We have to build new, gentle pathways for safety and autonomy. We can actually outline 6 pillars for updating the nervous system that directly counteract that old conditioning.
Okay, let's start with the thought process. Diffusion.
First, diffusion. When those old judgment thoughts pop up, you're lazy, you should be doing more, you failed. Instead of arguing with them or obeying them, you learn to notice them with a kind of compassionate humor.
So you create distance.
The goal is distance. You can literally externalize it. Ah, there's my inner bishop giving me performance reviews again. Or, that's just the soundtrack of my 1990s Sunday school class playing. It creates that critical space between the thought and your identity.
Okay, what's the second pillar?
Second, body awareness. If the old system taught her to intellectualize everything, the new process has to prioritize somatic awareness. Don't analyze the story behind the anxiety. Notice the sensation under the story.
Is it tightness in the gut, numbness in the hands?
Heat in the chest, whatever it is, that's your polyvagal state communicating. It's a physiological message of activation or shutdown, not a moral failure.
Third pillar.
Third, safe embodiment. You can't outrun sympathetic activation with more effort. The rewiring happens when you gently invite your body back to ventral safety. This requires simple, regulated actions like slow, complete breathing, even humming, which stimulates the vagus nerve.
Mental movement.
Gentle movement. It's about being curious about the feeling of tension rather than trying to fix it instantly with more productivity.
Fourth, values compass. The old pattern valued virtue, compliance, conditional worth.
The new strategy is about prioritizing your internal sense of vitality and aliveness. What actions expand your sense of being fully alive and authentically yourself? Making choices based on what is vital and authentic, even small ones, directly works against that old groove of seeking external approval.
Fifth, microactions. Freedom isn't achieved in some grand, overwhelming gesture that might just trigger the same old fight response.
No, it's achieved through small, gentle moves. Setting a single boundary without feeling guilty. Taking a 15-minute rest without justifying it. Asking a small question without apologizing. These microactions teach the nervous system bite by bite that safety doesn't require perfection.
And the last one, sixth, community and co-regulation.
We heal best when we are witnessed and supported. Seeking communities where you feel seen, where your full self can breathe, is essential. Every shared laugh, every compassionate nod from someone who gets it. It softens the old grooves and teaches the nervous system that true belonging doesn't require flawless performance or belief.
So her final line, "You win," it reads like surrender to the old system that exhausted her. But if we use this nervous system lens,
it's actually the beginning of sovereignty. When the system that dictated her identity finally collapses, the nervous system starts to update its models because the old effort-driven fight response has been proven futile.
So that surrender is the first step in rewiring.
And that journey requires vast patience and self-compassion.
If we just zoom out one last time here, we realize that every single person is walking around in a body shaped by evolution and a nervous system conditioned by their unique history and culture. Every deeply held belief, religious, political, personal, it's all underpinned by a nervous system that's just trying to establish safety.
Behind every sense of certainty is a biological prediction, and it's designed to minimize surprise and maximize survival. Her experience is not a moral failing, it's a feature of being human. Evolution didn't design us for doctrinal consistency or moral perfection.
It designed us for adaptation.
Exactly. And adaptation starts when the conditioned illusions crack, when the controlled hallucination fails, and when the body finally says, enough.
Her dorsal collapse wasn't a failure. It was evolution speaking. It was the biological necessity of releasing an effort-based pattern that had become unsustainable and, frankly, destructive to her well-being.
And healing is fundamentally about recognizing that you are older than your conditioning, you're deeper than your specific beliefs, and that your nervous system is your most honest companion. Listening to that companion with compassion allows something ancient to relax and something new and autonomous to finally live.
The lazy valedictorian story is a classic intersection, a samskara meeting contradiction, a predictive mind losing its map, and a nervous system doing backflips for safety. It proves that maximal effort cannot fix systemic incoherence, and that collapse is sometimes exactly what truth feels like when it finally enters the body.
So maybe that's what it means to be infants on thrones. And now, to sum it all up, we leave you with this haiku.
Grooves carved long ago, shatter in a single breath. Still, your body knows.
Thank you for listening to...
By the way, we need to talk about memory, but probably not the kind you think you have.
Right.
We are, I think, opening up what might be the ultimate, most ancient archive of the human experience.
When most of us talk about memory, we're really talking about the highlights reel, the specific emotional events, the birthdays, those embarrassing moments from high school. We focus so much on the conscious narrative.
The story we tell ourselves.
Exactly. But the truth is, the really tough stuff, the moments of crisis, the times when you feel fundamentally insufficient.
Yeah.
All of that is being recorded on a system that is infinitely older than your conscious mind.
And that's really the core of this deep dive, isn't it? We're trying to flip the perspective entirely.
Complete.
The idea that you are not primarily a thinking being who occasionally remembers things. You are a living, walking, talking ecosystem, a bundle of, well, ancient, successful chemistry that remembers far more than the conscious mind even knows is there.
And that's the mission today, to explore these really dense biological layers of memory that sit right underneath our conscious recall.
We're using deep biology, evolutionary history to try and radically redefine how we understand these fundamental human responses.
Why do you freeze up? Why do you feel safe around certain people but not others? Why does failure feel like a biological threat?
And what's so surprising about this, and what I really want to dig into, is that the most fundamental layers of this memory, they aren't about words or feelings of sadness or joy.
Not at all. It's much more basic.
It's about stable chemistry. It's about persistent survival. It's an instruction set written in the oldest language there is, designed simply to keep the lights on.
It really is the ultimate internal record. We're all carrying this success memoir that stretches back 4 billion years.
4 billion years.
And that deep biological history is still running the core operating system. Even when our relatively new conscious mind tries to write a totally different script about our worth or our failures.
Okay, so let's unpack this. It's an enormous idea. We need to start right at the beginning, I think.
Let's do it.
Looking at what we're calling the deep archive memory beneath the mind.
Right. So if you just, ask a random person what memory is, they'll almost always talk about conscious recall.
Sure, a mental photo album.
Exactly. Or a really vivid recollection of a high school sporting event or a state conference or something like that.
That specific autobiographical memory, the one that lets us tell our own life story, that's what we center everything on.
But the astonishing fact, and it really is astonishing, is that in the whole history of life on Earth, that specific memory system is a very, very recent invention.
So it's like a new feature.
A very new feature. Think of it like this. The internet existed for decades as just text on a screen before the first colorful graphical web browser was ever invented.
Okay, that makes sense.
Our ability to narrate I Remember When is the newest app on an incredibly ancient operating system. It's a late add-on.
So it's sitting on top of something much older?
It is. The foundation, the OS, has been running for eons, and it's been storing data about one thing: survival and persistence. Long before a creature could recall a single word or a feeling, life was already remembering.
It's not in a language we would recognize.
Not at all, because the language it speaks is chemistry. And this brings us to life's very first memory system: molecular memory.
This is the bedrock.
This is the bedrock. Molecular memory is the non-sentimental archive. You have to go all the way back to the dawn of life.
To the primordial soup.
To the primordial soup, yeah. When a strand of RNA, or maybe DNA managed to copy itself without immediately just disintegrating in all that primordial chaos. That single act, that stabilization, that repetition, that was the very first successful memory.
Okay, so this is so important. It's not memory as in I remember my first kiss.
No.
It's memory as in I remember how to stay intact.
Precisely. That's a perfect way to put it. When a specific arrangement of atoms proves stable, repeatable, and able to survive a totally chaotic environment, we're talking extreme heat, punishing radiation, massive oceanic shifts.
It's just chaos.
Total chaos. If a pattern survived that, it was preserved. It worked. That successful configuration was remembered through its persistence. Survival was the ultimate non-negotiable metric of success.
So life remembers through what it keeps. And what it kept were these stable, resilient configurations. And the profound insight here, which I really want you to sit with, is that every single bit of you is built from those winners.
Every molecule, every successful cellular process, it's an archived solution to an environmental problem that was solved billions of years ago.
This is where we can start to redefine this whole idea of failure.
Yes, because if your basic existence is predicated on billions of years of molecular success, then the notion that you are fundamentally failure or insufficient it's just a narrative. It's a story written over the top of a monumental biological achievement.
And as life climbed this evolutionary staircase, the memory system became layered. It got more complex.
It did. Let's look at this layered stack of remembering, starting right above the molecules with cellular memory.
Cellular memory.
So as those successful molecules started organizing, we got cells, these little boundary-making geniuses.
Right.
And cellular memory is all about practical skills. You know, how do I maintain my wall against the outside world? How do I pump ions efficiently? How do I repair damage that's caused by stress or radiation?
And maybe most importantly, how do I cooperate?
Crucially, yes. Because the cells that remembered how to talk to their neighbors, how to share resources, how to form these larger functional communities, those are the cells that ended up forming complex bodies.
And the ones that didn't?
The ones that refused to cooperate, the ones that failed to maintain their boundaries or respond efficiently, they were essentially deleted from the memory stack. They didn't make it.
So every single cell you have right now is descended from a line of successful, cooperative, self-regulating units.
It's a lineage of genius micromanagement happening inside you every second.
Which then leads to the next layer up, right? Physiological memory.
Right.
Now we're talking about movement and reaction becoming automated.
Now we're talking about nerve circuits. These circuits are designed to archive successful patterns of physical reaction.
Okay, give me an example.
Imagine an early amphibian. It encounters a sudden change in temperature. Does it burrow? Does it swim away? What does it do?
Okay.
If burrowing keeps it safe, that specific neural firing pattern, that physiological sequence that coordinates all the muscle movement and sensory input, gets remembered. It gets archived.
And the key advantage there is speed.
Speed is everything.
Yeah.
You don't have to reinvent the escape strategy every single time the grass rustles or a shadow passes over.
You just run it.
You just run the program. This rapid reuse of these patterns provides that critical evolutionary edge. React first, think later. Your reflexes are essentially your physiological memory recalling a successful ancestral maneuver.
Okay, so we have molecular, cellular, physiological. What's the last layer?
The last, and maybe for us, the most important layer, relational memory. This isn't just about chemistry or reflexes, it's about connection.
This is the memory that connection equals absolute safety.
And it is deeply hardwired. Look at the mechanics of it. Behaviors like sustained eye contact, or a soothing vocal tone, or physical closeness, they don't just register as nice feelings in our conscious mind.
It's a chemical process.
It's absolutely chemical.
Right.
They actively signal the nervous system to dump soothing chemicals, lowering stress hormones, regulating heart rate. It's a biological state change.
And why did this memory succeed so well?
Because the ancestors whose offspring benefited from this regulated, attached caregiving had a radically increased chance of survival, especially during the long, vulnerable state of mammalian infancy.
So the body remembers that relationships aren't a luxury.
No, they are a fundamental physiological requirement for survival and safety. When you hug someone, you are engaging a system that has defaulted to a proven survival strategy for millions of years.
It makes perfect sense, but it really does challenge that idea that the mind is the main event here.
It seems like it, doesn't it?
It seems the body and its layered memory are the main architects of our day-to-day responses.
They absolutely are. And this brings us right to our next section. DNA, the 4-billion-year-old success memoir. This concept is it's genuinely breathtaking in its scope.
It is. I really want everyone listening to internalize this. Every cell, every organ, every system in your body is a product of an unbroken lineage of success.
Trace your lineage.
Yeah.
And don't just stop at the obvious points, your great-grandparents.
Go way back.
Go way, way back. Past the medieval farmer, past the first Homo sapiens walking out of Africa. Trace it back through the upright primates, the little shrew-like mammals, the first fish with skeletons, the wriggling segmented worms, and back.
All the way to the earliest replicating molecules.
Floating in that primeval soup.
And the incredible thing is you cannot find a single broken link.
Not one. The chain is perfect.
Which means that every single one of your direct ancestors succeeded just enough in the 2 or 3 key areas that really mattered.
That's right. They avoided immediate catastrophe, they found sustenance, they healed from wounds, and they reproduced. That's it. That's the formula.
And DNA is the book that tells that story.
DNA is the stitched-together memoir of that persistence. And it's not a neutral document. It's a record of what worked.
It's biased towards success.
It's completely biased toward success. Think of it as the ultimate operating manual, updated every single generation with one single focus. Keep going.
So all the complex pathways that govern your metabolism, your immune response, your ability to repair damaged tissue.
They're not random instructions. They are detailed plans that have been refined by millions of trials and errors, selected only because they succeeded.
And this gives us the power to truly reframe failure. Because when we hit a personal wall, an existential wall, the conscious mind is so devastatingly quick to attack itself. The mind says, I failed the test, I am insufficient, I am lazy. It writes this whole catastrophic narrative.
But all the while, the body, this monument to persistence, is sending the complete opposite message. That narrative of self-doubt is late-stage critique being issued against an entity that is inherently biologically successful.
So you're saying success is not something you have to earn from the outside?
Not at its core. It's not something you get from a school or a church or a workplace. Success is the only reason your cells exist at all.
That is such a fundamental truth we overlook. You might feel like a failure based on a quarterly review or a single conversation. But every biological process keeping you alive right now, the efficiency of your mitochondria, the constant vigilance of your immune system, the repair of your skin, is a product of nonstop, successful iteration for 4 billion years.
You are an inheritor of deep persistence. When your conscious mind says, I quit, the ancient archive inside you says, I literally haven't had a day off in 4 billion years, and I'm going to keep trying until I find another stable configuration.
So this ancient molecular archive of success doesn't just sit there.
No, it's not a museum piece.
It has an air, and that air is the nervous system, which is what dictates our moment-to-moment responses.
It's the executor of the will.
I like that. So if the body is this vault of successful memories, how does that physical record translate into what we do every single day? That takes us into our next section, the nervous system and polyvagal theory.
The nervous system is that living heirloom we spoke of. It's not a cold computer. It's a dynamic, layered repository that's been shaped by countless rounds of evolutionary selection based on one very simple question.
Did this response help or hurt survival?
That's it. That's the only question that matters at that level.
And this is how our default settings got created. Survival responses, freeze, fight, flee, and the one we just talked about, connect.
Yeah.
They impressed themselves into our neural architecture through sheer repetition and selection. They became the successful inherited patterns that we reach for automatically when we sense even the slightest hint of threat or safety.
And just think about the history we all carry. The ancestor who correctly assessed that a sudden noise required mobilization, they survived to pass on their fight or flee genes. The baby who emitted just the right pitch of cry, signaling distress in a way that pulled a caregiver close, that baby survived.
The social primate that could read the subtle shifts in another's gaze.
Survived because they avoided conflict or being ostracized. These successful reactions became our default code. They're baked into the system.
And to map this complex, layered history, we can use a really helpful framework, polyvagal theory.
Developed by Dr. Stephen Corges, yeah. It gives us a map of this ancient, layered memory system, and it describes the default patterns the body reaches for.
It organizes our response based on the evolutionary age of the neural circuits involved.
Specifically those connected to the vagus nerve. And what it really describes are 3 distinct states that are essentially 3 different memory protocols the body runs when it's trying to ensure safety.
So let's start with the newest, most sophisticated success strategy,
That would be the ventral vagal system.
which is often called the social engagement system. This is the most advanced survival strategy we have as mammals.
It is the absolute pinnacle of mammalian success. This is the state of being safe, connected, and socially engaged. This is the body remembering that connection works better than brute force or isolation ever could.
And what does that state feel like? What's happening in the body?
When we're in a ventral vagal state, our face muscles are relaxed, our inner ear is literally tuned to the frequency of human voices, our heart rate is regulated, and our digestive system is working efficiently. It's a state of growth and restoration.
So in daily life, that feels like ease, curiosity.
Shared humor, yeah. It's the feeling you get when you're having a productive conversation with a colleague, or laughing with your friends, or singing a familiar song with people.
And these aren't just pleasant side effects.
No, they are active, ancient mammalian success strategies. They signal internally. We are safe here together. Energy can be spent on growth and repair, not on defense.
But if that connection is suddenly severed, or if the system detects a threat, maybe someone's tone of voice changes, or the internet cuts out right before a huge deadline, what happens then?
Then the system moves down the ladder to the next oldest successful strategy, the sympathetic system.
The mobilization success.
Exactly. This is the body remembering that action can solve problems. It gears up for fight or flight. Adrenaline, cortisol, it's full-on emergency mode.
But in the modern world, this doesn't just translate to literally running away from a lion.
Not at all. It translates to working harder, researching urgently, sending frantic emails, arguing a point with fierce passion, or pulling all-nighters to meet a deadline.
It's history's favorite do-something mode.
It is. It's high energy, and it's highly effective when you're facing a physical challenge. But applying that massive, ancient mobilization strategy relentlessly to purely existential or emotional threats.
Like career uncertainty or deep cognitive dissonance.
It's just exhausting. It's like running a marathon on 2 hours of sleep every single day. The system isn't built for that kind of sustained activation.
So what happens when that fails? When mobilization doesn't solve the problem?
If that strategy fails repeatedly, if the problem cannot be solved by working harder, or if the perceived threat is just overwhelming and escaping isn't an option, the body has one last, oldest, and most drastic survival mechanism. And that's the dorsal vagal system, the conservation success. The conservation success. Yes. This is the system remembering that sometimes shutting down, going numb, collapsing, dissociating is the safest bet.
It's a last resort.
It is. It's designed to conserve energy, drop your metabolism, and potentially even feign death to avoid further damage or detection. It looks, from the outside, like you're giving up.
But biologically, it's something else entirely.
Biologically, it is a brilliant energy conservation maneuver that's been refined over millions of years to keep the core systems going until the crisis passes. It's an active, ancient accounting trick. It's not passive at all.
This layered map is so critical because it allows us to look at a really complicated human response, like the one in our case study, and see it not as a moral failing, but as a perfect, albeit painful, sequence of inherited biological responses.
Exactly. Which brings us to section 4 and the case study of the lazy valedictorian.
This is an archetype I think a lot of people will recognize. The high-achieving individual who seems to be doing everything right, but then they hit a crisis wall and just collapse. And they feel this overwhelming guilt and shame.
To understand this, we have to understand the personal programming that shapes this reaction, a concept we can call samskara.
Can you break that down for us?
Samskara is a Sanskrit term, and in this context, we're defining it as the supercharged, deep layer of personal patterning that's added by your culture, your religion, and your family.
So if molecular memory is the operating system,
And polyvagal theory is the hardware map.
then samskara is the customized software.
It's the high-resolution software that dictates what equals safety in your specific environment.
So for our lazy valedictorian, the samskara is this deep, deep groove connecting worth and work.
It's highly specific. It means that the feeling you get from a perfectly organized binder, the smell of a clean-pressed shirt, or the delivery of a flawless presentation, those physical sensory experiences become fused chemically with the feeling of belonging, of validation, even of divine approval.
So this person starts out in phase 1. Ventral vagal safety is completely fused with this cultural samskara of achievement.
Yes.
Yeah.
Their nervous system makes a survival calculation, and the answer is excel equals safety. Conform equals belonging. Overfunction equals praised and secure.
The equation sustained effort, security, gets wired so deeply that it just feels like instinct. It becomes the most successful adaptive strategy they have ever employed in their life.
Then comes phase 2, the collision. The prediction error meets sympathetic activation.
The moment of truth.
Right. When this person encounters information or a situation like a major historical revelation about their worldview that clashes dramatically with their predictive model, their conscious mind feels confusion and cognitive dissonance.
But the body registers something else.
The body registers immediate existential threat. It doesn't care about theology or history. It only cares about safety.
So how does an organism with this specific history of successful effort respond to perceived threat?
It defaults immediately to its most successful, most ingrained pattern. It activates sympathetic mobilization, but it's filtered through that samskara of achievement.
So she doesn't run from a tiger.
No, she runs straight to the research library. She doubles down on her devotion. She attends every meeting, spends weeks crafting a perfectly worded research email to her leaders, and magnifies her sense of calling or duty.
So this frantic, intense effort is her body's successful memory kicking in.
It is not failure or irrational behavior. Her nervous system is performing its deeply conditioned success mechanism perfectly. It's shouting, "Danger detected. Use the high-effort strategy that has always worked to restore safety, coherence, and belonging."
That reframing is so essential. Her anxiety-fueled perfectionism is just the sound of her survival engine running at maximum capacity.
But then we reach phase 3, the fracture, the failure of success.
She expects that the trusted formula hard work plus honest questions will equal clarity and safety. She expects that to hold up, especially in high-stakes interactions like speaking to a community leader she trusts.
Right. But instead, she receives platitudes, dismissive answers, or just a request to simply trust and defer her questions.
At the conscious level, that's rejection. It's betrayal.
But at the level of embodied memory, the message is far more serious. It's chilling. The body registers. Our primary success strategy failed.
It's a system failure.
We poured massive amounts of fuel weeks of sleep, mental resources, emotional vulnerability into this system, and we got nothing back. The connection to safety was not restored.
And when sympathetic effort repeatedly fails to restore that coherence?
The body flips the switch. It moved to the ultimate ancient conservation strategy.
The dorsal vagal collapse.
The system shifts, and sometimes violently, to dorsal vagal collapse. It feels like numbness, exhaustion, withdrawal, deep depression, or dissociation.
And the conscious narrator labels this as defeat, as a crisis of faith, or, and this is the key word, as sheer laziness.
But the body's ancient, unsentimental bookkeeping views it completely differently. It's an energy conservation maneuver. It's the body saying, with millions of years of data to back it up, we will not keep pouring resources into a system that repeatedly fails to yield safety or coherence.
So the collapse is the ultimate act of biological wisdom.
It is. It is the body refusing to be exploited by a strategy that no longer serves its core survival purpose.
And that brings us to why that word lazy lands like a biological curse, specifically for this high-achieving archetype.
It's because it attacks her primary survival strategy. That sustained effort that she fused with her feelings of safety and belonging.
Her entire system revolts because the insult isn't just a critique of her Sunday habits.
No, it's an attack on her 4-billion-year-old successful pattern of existence. Her ancient memory is screaming, "How dare you call this strategy lazy? This strategy has kept me and all my ancestors alive for my entire lineage."
Her collapse isn't proof of weakness.
It's proof of a sophisticated, self-regulating mechanism refusing to burn down the entire house when the existing blueprint just proved unworkable.
Let's connect this understanding of patterned response to the cutting edge of neuroscience. Section 5, controlled hallucination and reframing lazy.
This brings in the work of neuroscientist Anil Seth.
And his argument is fascinating. He argues that the brain isn't just passively receiving external data and then building reality from scratch every second.
That would be wildly inefficient. It would be so resource intensive.
So instead, what is it doing?
Instead, the brain is constantly making its best guess about what's going on out there, and it relies heavily on predictive models built from its own history.
So we're essentially operating in what he calls a controlled hallucination.
Exactly. And this hallucination is built from our deep memories. The samskaras we talked about, the cultural narratives, the relational experiences, and all those ancient survival patterns. The purpose is pure efficiency. Prediction is just memory doing its best to save energy.
And this is why change is so hard, isn't it? The brain tries to maintain the hallucination.
It does. It tries to maintain that leaders will give real answers, or more effort will fix this problem, because that follows the logic of deep memory. Trust the strategies that have kept you safe and conserve resources by not generating a new reality model every single day.
So when the lazy valedictorian is clinging desperately to the belief that the system will work if she just tries harder.
She isn't being willfully naive. She is following the most efficient script available from her deep archives. It's an energy-saving move.
So when does the system finally break down?
It only breaks down when the prediction errors, all the incoming data that contradicts the model pile up so high that the established model starts costing more energy to maintain than it would take to build a new one.
And the body is keeping score.
The ancient system, governed by molecular efficiency, finally decides this reality model is too expensive to maintain. And that decision follows that ancient ironclad rule. Stop burning fuel on unsuccessful strategies.
The emotional meltdown, the feeling of collapse, it all looks like chaotic failure from the conscious mind's perspective.
But underneath, the most fundamental success system in the universe is simply phasing out patterns that no longer serve efficient survival. It's a biological audit. It's a course correction.
And that brings us back to that word, lazy, a word we now have to just dispose of.
We do. It lands like a curse because it fundamentally misrepresents the sheer effort of existence. It attacks the individual's primary mechanism for achieving safety and attachment.
The nervous system, that living heirloom, just revolts. Its ancient memory is shouting.
I am not lazy. I have been on continuous duty tracking threat and safety for millions of years. This collapse is the most dedicated, sustained effort I could offer to stop the wasteful burning of resources.
So the final reframe is this. If you identify with that feeling of collapse after massive, massive effort,
Look at your nervous system not as a malfunctioning machine or a lazy quitter, but as a cathedral of successful experiments. It is an unbroken lineage of persistence.
the contradiction of calling a system like that lazy is just, it's impossible to sustain when you understand the biology.
How can a system be lazy when every cell is there because it kept working? When collapse itself is an active, energy-conserving strategy honed over millennia to maximize your odds of survival.
The meltdown wasn't the moment of failure.
No, it was the moment a 4-billion-year-old ecosystem said, this pattern no longer works, we will remember this, we will shut down the unsustainable burn, and we will adapt.
So the part of you that believes you failed is a latecomer. It's a young narrator reading a very narrow, very recent script.
And the body beneath is older, wiser, and so much more honest. Its primary job is survival and adaptation.
Everything else is just extra credit.
Exactly.
That's not laziness.
That's the body doing what it evolved to do, even when the mind can't totally see it yet.
But we're still evolving, aren't we?
And maybe that's what it means to be infants on thrones.
Thank you for listening to Infants on Thrones.